Welcome to CBC News Toronto. I'm Dwight Drummond. Two people affected by the Ford government's plans to cut out-of-country medical coverage went to Queen's Park today. They say without OHIP coverage, they have no other option. They're not eligible for travel health insurance. Lorenda Redekop has more on their story and the reaction they received.
It was really a major interruption.
They came to the legislature in hopes of changing the government's mind. They may not look sick, but they are. Both are in kidney failure.
I need hemodialysis to stay alive. I do dialysis 5 or 6 times a week, 7 hours a time.
But Allison Knutson visits family in the U.S. Right now, provincial health insurance pays up to $210 for out-of-country dialysis. That's still much less than it costs in the U.S. Under the government's plan, the OHIP payout would be zero.
I don't know who they spoke to. I don't know who they consulted with.
John Landerville is a PhD student in Detroit. He found out about his condition partway through his program.
The fact that it seems as though the minister had no sense of the ramifications of these actions is really disheartening, because they just kind of moved forward wantonly without any sense of who this would affect, how it would affect people, the types of, the fact that my future is jeopardized by the choices they're making.
They pleaded their case together with an NDP MPP.
I want to hear back from you, Christine Elliott, Minister of Health.
Then the opposition raised it during question period.
Ontarians who need these life-saving treatments deserve the same opportunities as everyone else. That's why our public health care system is supposed to provide exactly that.
The health minister seemed open to changes.
We do understand that there may be special circumstances, people who are on dialysis programs that find it very difficult to obtain private coverage. We want to work with them to make sure they can receive the coverage they need so that they are able to travel.
That's the first step, right? Like, it's a step in the right direction.
The two didn't meet directly with the health minister today, but we're told that she plans to consult with them. They're hopeful that there will be changes made before this new OHIP policy is set to take effect in October. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
And then there were two that were still on the floor and they were shaking like they were having seizures.
It was just like something I've never seen, I guess.
There were two young men in an unconscious state laying on the patio.
Two teens nearly die after overdosing on what they thought was pot. They are alive thanks to the quick work of some Halton police officers. The teens were at a party at a Milton home when they collapsed after smoking what they thought was marijuana. Magda Garba-Selassie is following the story and joins us live now. Magda, a terrifying experience for these young people.
It was, Dwight. I actually spoke to two of the teens that were there. I also talked to a neighbor who saw this all go down. And what we know from police is that there were about 10 to 12 high school students hanging out at a home right here behind me. Two 18-year-olds were out back when all of a sudden there was a life-threatening situation.
And he just kind of dropped to the ground.
Anissa Adams heard some commotion next door. She looked out the window and then went out to the back.
And I saw probably about 5 or 6 teenagers kind of on a deck, and then I saw 2 on the floor. And I was like, this doesn't look right. And we kind of just kept like watching, and then the other boys who could walk were going inside and outside. And then there were 2 that were still on the floor and they were shaking like they were having seizures.
She called 911. Meanwhile, Amar Abdi, one of the teens at that house, describes what he saw.
It looked like they were on like some next drugs. I couldn't tell because I haven't seen anything like this before. Like they were acting really weird, like their bodies and stuff.
These 3 officers arrived first, even before paramedics.
Immediately observed that their breathing was really slow and shallow, frothing from the mouth and in an unconscious state. So at that point, that in combination, we could smell a little bit of marijuana in the air.
But based on the symptoms, he said they determined this was opioid related. The officers reached for the life-saving drug naloxone.
You give it a quick press with your thumb, which atomizes the drug into the nostril. So when they started to come around and show signs of consciousness, we were pretty happy.
For both Staff Sergeant Chris Lawson and Constable Chris Peters, it was their first time using naloxone.
Their condition was pretty bad upon arrival, so had we come 5-10 minutes later, it would have been much worse.
Police are still working to determine exactly what the teens may have ingested. But for now, all those involved are being applauded for their quick thinking.
But the fact that I helped some other people's children made me feel really good.
Now, police are taking this opportunity to remind people that they need to call for help in an overdose situation. Because of the Good Samaritan Drug Overdose Act, if they simply have the drug on them, they will not be facing a charge. So police say, please make that call because you could save a life. And Dwight, that's really what happened here. 2 lives were saved.
Very important information there. Thank you for that, Magda. So you saw how the officers in Magda's story were able to recognize the signs of an opioid overdose, likely saving those 2 lives. Well, one GTA MPP wants all police officers in the province to be trained to recognize and treat overdoses.
The Mandatory Police Training Act will ensure all police officers will be trained in recognizing the signs and symptoms of an opioid overdose and in administering naloxone. RNAO's mandate to advance
Bill 105
healthy
was
public
introduced
policy
in the legislature earlier this month and has yet to be passed into law. The bill has received a lot of support, but the head of the Toronto Police Union isn't sure that it's necessary at this time.
I think the bill, quite frankly, is unnecessary. Police forces and police services in Ontario are making that transition. We are training people, but to say that to be out there exercising your authority as a police officer, that you have to be fully trained with naloxone, it just doesn't make sense.
Last year, the province amended legislation so that police officers who administer naloxone don't end up subjected to a Special Investigations Unit probe. Another major deal in Canada's airline industry could be in the works. Air Canada is in talks to buy Air Transat for more on the $500 million. That's how much it's going to cost. We'll take a look at what it could mean for consumers a little later in the show. A frightening situation in Georgetown today after a power surge led to a number of fires.
Our whole second floor is gone up in flames. So the whole second floor is gone, all the roofing's down. And now it's like a water park in there now.
That man says his home was gutted by the fire. He wasn't home at the time and learned of the fire after a neighbor called to say he saw smoke coming from the home. Officials say it was sparked by what they called an overvoltage situation, which in turn caused a power surge.
We started receiving calls at approximately 9:30 for service, ranging from reports of fire to smells of smoke, other odor investigations, and in total over 30 calls we responded to.
So we'll be going door to door this afternoon, delivering letters to every resident affected, advising them to look at their panel. If they're unsure or if there's obvious signs of electrical blackening on their outlets, is to call in a licensed electrician.
2 residential fires resulted from the surge, but there were no injuries. Officials say about 3,800 hydro customers were impacted with either power loss or electrical issues. An investigation is now on the way to determine exactly what went wrong.
This is Charlie. 2 days ago, his owners were left distraught after he was stolen outside a store. But today, a happy ending. I'm Kelda Yoon at Woodbine Beach, where Charlie was found. Coming up, I'll tell you how the power of social media led to the happy reunion and the lessons learned.
As the weather gets warmer, Toronto Public Health is warning residents to be extra cautious when they venture outdoors because of black-legged ticks.
So over the last several years that we've been doing active tick surveillance in the City of Toronto, we have found that the number of black-legged ticks has grown.
Health officials were at Morningside Park in Scarborough today to raise awareness and share tips on how to prevent tick bites. The city launched their annual surveillance program to show people how they keep tabs on the bugs. The operation started back in 2013, and since then, ticks have been found in 4 parks across our city. Black-legged ticks are the only type of tick in Ontario that can transmit the bacteria that causes Lyme disease.
We definitely want people to go out and enjoy the outdoors. They just need to be aware of where black-legged ticks are found and the kind of precautions they can take. It's this type of habitat where it's wooded and bushy. The ticks do like to climb at the top of bushes or the top of long grass.
Toronto Public Health says the best way to avoid tick bites when you're outdoors is to wear long pants and long sleeves, apply insect repellent containing DEET, carefully check your body from head to toe, and check your children and pets as well. Homeowners are also encouraged to mow their lawn regularly and remove any leaf or litter or weeds. And Colin Kennedy is out in the great outdoors today. I think you're at Dufferin Grove Park there, Colin?
Yeah, I'm here at Dufferin Grove Park at the market. That's right, Dwight. Yeah, we're kind of down here sort of talking to people, getting a gauge of how excited they are about the long weekend coming up. And you know, the long weekend, normally this one is the big one for gardeners, but that weather thing, yeah, it's been a bit of a problem. We've still been talking about patchy frost. There have been frost advisories in the area for the last couple of nights. And so it's a tricky weekend. All our gardeners are having to kind of look at different things or what they can be putting in or not putting in when we're still talking about frost. And it's been such a cold and such a wet spring. So coming up, we're going to get some tips for you and you can kind of see what you can do. But there are other ways to enjoy the long weekend. We all know about that too. You know, it's been an okay day today, not too bad. We had those little showers that rolled through and there's more to come, but it's a pretty good setup for what's going to happen into Friday. Let me take you through this. So the current temperature now 13 degrees. Markham sitting there at 15, St. Catharines at 17. We've actually had some sunny breaks at times and that's helped the temperature to climb a little bit, and then as the showers came through, the temperatures dropped a little bit as well. So the plan for the overnight, the forecast is that we are looking at more showers returning, and in fact there's a chance, you can see some of the heavier rains there on the radar off to the east, but there's actually going to be more to come a little later on this evening through the overnight hours. The odd embedded thunderstorm definitely not out of the question, and kind of lingering into tomorrow morning, seeing that risk. We can go to the forecast map and you'll see what's going to be happening in terms of the progression of this system moving through, so that we get a little bit more development through the overnight. Some of it carries on into the morning hours, and then a little patchy fog is possible before this is all going to start to clear out. So the overnight low 10 degrees, very, very mild, and then we get that nice clearing trend for tomorrow. What it means is a high of 18 degrees and lots of sunshine. I will mention though the west to northwesterly wind, that breeze will be a little bit on the cool side. Honestly, it's a pretty nice way to be sailing into this long weekend. And as I said, Dwight, coming up, we're going to talk to some folks and we'll get you some good gardening tips.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Colette. Another big deal is in the works in Canada's airline industry. Air Canada says it's in exclusive talks to take over airline and tour operator Air Transat. That would give Canada's largest airline even more control over the industry. Earlier this week, Canada's #2 airline, WestJet, agreed to a buyout by the financiers at Onyx Corporation. Our Alison Norcott has the details.
It's not a done deal, but some travelers in Montreal are already reacting to news that Air Canada could buy competitor Air Transat.
I think it just gives Air Canada more planes to fly, more people.
My only worry, she says, is that Air Transat's service will become as rotten as Air Canada's. In a news release, Air Canada called the potential deal a made-in-Quebec solution to maintain high-quality head office jobs and key functions in Montreal. It says the deal would be worth about $520 million.
It's a lot of emotion for me because, of course, I was there for the first flight of Air Transat with all employees crying of joy.
Air Transat has been a Quebec company since it started more than 30 years ago, co-founded by now Premier François Legault.
Of course, being bought by our competitor at the time, it's not easy to accept. But the good news is that Air Canada has an headquarters in Montreal.
Still, there are a lot of questions about how the deal would play out.
Air Canada could operate Air Transat as a separate entity and leave it alone. And Air Transat would basically operate as a separate carrier. The other scenario is you fold the whole thing into Air Canada, and the Air Transat airline brand disappears.
Either way, he says, while it may be good for shareholders, it would mean less competition for consumers and possibly some job losses.
By merging two companies together like that, they're afraid of redundancies and if there would be any cuts or anything like that. So the main priority for us, the IAM, is job security, making sure that all our members keep their jobs and their benefits.
The airlines have given themselves 30 days to negotiate a deal, but even if they come to one, it could still face regulatory hurdles, including from the Competition Bureau. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
30 years ago, we didn't have these, but we did have Kids Help Phone. Coming up, why this organization is still so sorely needed in Canada and how they've evolved over the last 3 decades to meet the needs of kids in distress on all platforms.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Another American state is moving toward highly restrictive abortion laws. The Senate in Missouri has passed a bill that bans the procedure at 8 weeks of pregnancy. The Republican-led Senate passed the legislation early this morning. It still needs approval in the Republican-led House before it can go to Governor Mike Parson to be signed. Parson, who is also a Republican, supports the bill. The legislation includes exceptions for medical emergencies. Missouri doctors could face up to 15 years in prison for breaking the law. Yesterday, Alabama passed a law banning abortions at 6 weeks, and it doesn't allow exceptions for pregnancies resulting from rape or incest. China has formally arrested the two Canadian men it detained in December. Michael Korvig and Michael Spavor are accused of gathering and stealing state secrets. Under Chinese law, authorities can hold people for up to 6 months, meaning they had until June 10th to officially arrest the men. Speaking in Paris, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says freeing the Canadians is his government's utmost priority.
What we are always focused on is doing things that are going to help the Canadians being detained, that will continue to help Canadians in difficulty overseas. That's the lens that we take whenever we make decisions on what to do in the case, and that will not change. We will do things that we believe will help them.
Global Affairs says Canadian Council officials have made regular visits to the men and will keep doing so. Spavor is a businessman and Kovrig works for a non-governmental organization. They were detained shortly after Canada arrested Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou on a U.S. extradition request. And the Prime Minister is in on an official visit to France. He used the trip to announce a new initiative for a problem back home. Justin Trudeau says his government is developing a digital charter to fight against online hate and misinformation. Salima Shivji has more now from Paris.
It was a thread throughout the Prime Minister's Paris visit and a focus again today as he met one-on-one with France's Emmanuel Macron.
Making sure that the internet is a safer space by ensuring that the web giants and tech companies take more responsibility.
Earlier in the day, Justin Trudeau's speech to a tech crowd lasted a full 24 minutes. There was plenty about the problems of online hate, disinformation, and election meddling, but very little about concrete solutions. Trudeau proposed a new digital charter, and he had a warning for social media platforms: clean up your act or else.
They have to step up in a major way to counter disinformation. And if they don't, we will hold them to account and there will be meaningful financial consequences.
Hints at tougher measures, but not a lot else. So what exactly do the Liberals mean when they talk about this new digital charter? It's meant to be an overarching set of principles for the Liberal government to follow. Every bit of policy that touches on this wider issue of risks online would be guided by those principles. It could mean changes through regulation and legislation, but also simply policy. The promise for a digital charter comes on the heels of Canada signing the Christchurch Call, a pledge for governments and tech companies to do more to stop another attack from being live streamed and shared. Only the U.S. has not signed on.
What Canada is doing is of interest to people from around the world, just like Canada is interested in solutions put forward by governments.
But for now, the main message from the ruling Liberals is stay tuned for more announcements to come soon. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Paris.
3 decades later, Kids Health Phone is still a lifeline for kids in crisis, but a lot has changed in the world since its launch in 1989. I spoke with the nonprofit CEO about how the hotline is evolving to keep up with kids' needs and why it is still an essential service today.
It was with much hoopla that plans were announced for Canada's first telephone counseling service for kids.
From the day it started, which is exactly 30 years ago right now, today, May 16th, we've been taking calls 24/7, and they call at any time of the day, any time of the night. And that's what's really amazing about what Kids Help Phone does for young people or offers to young people is we're without judgment.
Kids Help Phone?
We are there when they need them, however they need them, and for whatever reason.
What are you seeing kids need 30 years later?
30 years ago, the biggest reason kids were calling us was for depression and anxiety. Fast forward 30 years, and the biggest reason kids are calling us is depression and anxiety. It's just in bigger volume, bigger acuity. Kids are calling more about suicide, tougher things that they're grappling with. Life is very complicated for young people today.
My summer just started, and I'm already losing sleep over next year. I'm really glad you called.
Do you find like things like social media are playing a role in the changing dynamic of that?
Definitely. 30 years ago, cyberbullying did not exist. Sexting did not exist. So today, those are big pieces of what kids call and talk to us about.
You're finding that the need is actually growing out there?
Year over year, for example, we saw an increase in kids calling us about suicide by 30%.
Really?
That is staggering. On one side, you would go, oh my goodness, that is, as a parent, it scares the heck out of me. As a person who works in this sector, thank goodness Kids Help Phone was there for those 30% increase in kids calling about suicide.
Are you seeing more people coming through that? Because we're more aware now of LGBTQ communities, more marginalized communities.
Yes.
Are you seeing a change in demographic that way too?
So I would say the thing about Kids Health Phone is we have been there for kids no matter what all the way through. So there is no question that we see a lot of young people contact us through the LGBTQ community, Indigenous youth, which is a really serious public health emergency in this country, in our north, that we need to have more access for young people to reach services. We see new Canadians, refugees, and here's another interesting statistic that troubles us at Kids Help Phone, is only about 25% of the young people that reach out to us are guys.
Really?
And so that tells us that there is a big gap in service that we need to fill.
Do you hear from people that you've helped over the years? Are there stories out there from people who say, hey, without this service, I might not be around today?
Oh, we hear those stories all the time. I was speaking to a young guy yesterday, 25-year-old. When he was 14, he lost his brother to a brain aneurysm. And he went into a very serious situation, dark place in his life, and tried to commit suicide. And Kids Help Phone was there. He will say, without Kids Help Phone, he might not be here today.
Kids Help Phone also has a live chat service on their website, and you can also text them anytime. Text CONNECT to 686868.
The Summer of Space kicks off here at the Ontario Science Centre. We'll talk to the son of the first man on the moon. Mark Armstrong will talk about a new IMAX film that details his father's famous first steps. That's coming up.
50 years ago, Neil Armstrong became the first man to walk on the moon. The Ontario Science Centre plans to mark this momentous occasion with exhibits and a screening of the documentary Apollo 11. And a special guest will be on hand to bring his personal perspective of that moment. Philippe Lishanuk has more.
Like almost everyone else on the planet, Mark Armstrong watched Apollo 11 take off from Cape Canaveral in Florida.
We had a more suspenseful moment than your standard viewer.
It was a bit different from the perspective of a 6-year-old watching his father take off into space.
So we were sitting there looking, and all we saw was smoke, and we were waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. It seemed an eternity, and eventually we saw it peek out through this exhaust cloud.
And take that famous first step.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Armstrong is in Toronto today for a special screening of the documentary Apollo 11 at the Ontario Science Centre. This year marks the 50th anniversary of that historic moment, and he's happy that there are now plans to return.
I do think a return to the moon is overdue, probably long overdue. And I'm thrilled that we are contemplating and planning for a diverse group of people to lead that effort.
NASA has announced the name of its next mission to the moon. The American Space Agency will call it Artemis, after the Greek moon goddess who is also the twin of Apollo. And that's fitting because the next mission to the moon is also expected to carry the first woman. And after the first all-female spacewalk in March was canceled because there were no spacesuits that would fit female astronauts, news of a woman heading to the moon inspires these high school students to reach higher.
Yeah, it was disappointing because I was actually looking forward to it, and I was keeping up with the news about it just because it's amazing, like all women, and that's just something that normally doesn't happen.
It's like it's becoming more inspirational, like to people, giving them like hope.
The Women in Space exhibit opens May 19th and will be a central feature of the Ontario Science Centre's Summer of Space exhibit, celebrating how far women astronauts have gone and how much further they'll be able to go. Philippe Lishanuk, CBC News, Toronto.
I was 5 years old. I was coming down from my room in the morning, and my dad said, "Guess what?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "Well, we bought a sailboat, and I'm going to sail you around the world."
This young lady has helped her family sail around the world, and coming up, we'll bring you to some of the many places she's been in her short 11 years. All right, you knew we had to talk about it. It's a tough day for Raptors fans as the team lost Game 1 to the Milwaukee Bucks last night.
Giannis, Lopez, deep three, and it's good. 104-100.
It wasn't the result we wanted, but we've been here before. Game 1s just aren't the Raptors' thing. Toronto lost to Milwaukee 108-100 in the first game of the Eastern Conference Finals. The team's record is now 3-15 all-time in first game of a playoff series. It isn't all doom and gloom, though, for our Raptors. However, Kyle Lowry says the team is moving forward instead of dwelling on the tough loss.
We can't worry about, this, that, and the other. We got to worry about what happened. We learned from yesterday and move forward today and get better for tomorrow. One game isn't going to decide the series. That's the one thing about a series is the first of four.
Lowry had one of his best games of the playoffs last night. He scored 30 points, made 7 3-pointers, and nearly led the Raptors to the win. But his efforts fell a little bit short. Raptors three-point specialist Danny Green says he has to do better and help Kyle Lowry out more.
He's huge. He's huge. And the way he played last night, that's why I think was most disappointing for myself and us collectively of not stepping up and taking care of that game. When he plays that well, we got to win games like that.
The Raptors look to steal Game 2 when they take on the Bucks tomorrow night. The game tips off at 8:30. Game 3 is back home at Scotiabank Arena on Sunday. And I know my friend Colette will be watching, but right now she's out at Dufferin Grove Park at the Farmers Market.
I am, Dwight. Yeah, we're down here. You know, we've got the holiday weekend coming up. I know no one's forgotten that. Normally, it is one of the biggest gardening weekends of the year. And there's just this little problem that we've been having with the weather. Cold, wet, makes things a little bit tricky. We've still been talking about frost, and that's a real problem for some of the crops and the things that people would normally be planting. So we're going to have a little bit of a chat here and get some ideas of what it is that you can be doing. I'm joined by Jens Eller now. And Jens, can you tell me a little bit? You're one of the vendors here. You have all the greenhouses and things like that for your local produce. What do you recommend to the gardener at home?
Yeah, I think you can do some cold weather crops outside, like your spinach, your arugulas, your Swiss charts. You can seed or transplant this time of the year. It's fairly wet where we are, but those will work, you know, and then maybe just you have to cover them a little bit with some row cover in really cold nights. Sometimes it still goes down to freezing at times, but yeah, that should work out. And then like tomatoes and stuff, you have to wait till June, I guess. You know, that's usually the best, safest time to do that. Yeah.
And because it's been this kind of a season, how's it impacted your own growing and your own business? I mean, you've got the protection, so has it really been anything you've had to deal with this weather?
Well, it has. We're not outside in the field yet. We're just trying to get out there. So far, we use hoop houses in order to get an early start in certain things, and we have a lot of seedlings piling up that we're dying to get out, you know, but it just hasn't happened yet. But I'm hoping Sunday looks like it's going to be a nice day, so maybe I can go out there and work some of the fields and get the garden slowly ready.
And you've got a gorgeous spread here of produce, fresh. Can you tell me a little bit about it? What are we seeing here?
Yeah, right now, same thing, stuff that grows good in cooler weather. There's bok choy, some Asian greens like a Mitsuna pak choy mix. This here is a mustard cross, and then we went to the forest to forage a little bit right now. The wild leeks, the ramps are in season, which are good for maybe another couple of weeks. Those are beautiful.
Leeks, that's a short season, the leeks, right? And it's now.
Leek, yeah, it's right now, so they're out there like maybe another week, couple of weeks, I would say, where we are. And then that's over. That's always a good sign of spring.
But it's important too, can I just ask with the leeks that you don't harvest those?
You don't overpick, you know, when you find a big stand, or you leave most of them there. You just take the biggest ones, you know, and then move on and find some more. And then if there's a spot doesn't have too much, then just leave them alone. So.
Thank you so much for the tips. You know, we'll get there. Maybe it's not going to be this weekend, but it's going to happen. Spring,
sure.
Real spring.
It always comes eventually, you know.
That's right. And speaking of coming eventually, let's talk about what's going on with our weather and what we're seeing with the temperatures out there right now. We are looking at things being, okay, a little bit cool. We had some showers that rolled through earlier today, and we do have the chance of seeing a few more showers starting to come through the overnight. Even the odd thunderstorm, not out of the question, and then lingering into tomorrow morning a bit of this, so there could be even a little bit of patchy fog that we'll be seeing. You see the current temperatures there, and those temperatures will be coming up a little bit more tomorrow. So once we get through the wet conditions, we're going to see sunshine for us on Friday, and because of that, we'll see a high of about 19 degrees. Very nice to see that. Overnight tonight, by the way, we're talking about a temperature, a low of about 10 degrees, and we've got to check out what's happening as we get into the 5-day forecast and what you can expect for this long weekend. Saturday, a little bit cooler. It looks at this point like that system stays just to the south of us and then rides in Sunday into Monday. I've got a chance for seeing some rain showers in there and extra cloud for sure, but it's not going to be rainy all weekend, and we should see those temperatures coming up a little bit into Sunday and into Monday as well, Dwight, which we will be so happy. Maybe we'll get some gardening done finally.
Yes, finally. Thank you, Colette. CBC News has learned that the Ford government is going to offer municipalities help finding cost savings. The province will give cities, including Toronto, assistance with what it calls value for money audits.
We've done through quite a process of finding the efficiencies, doing things smarter, and so we're happy to support all our transfer partners, of which we give a lot of money to the municipalities, so universities, schools and hospitals, other agencies, and we've learned a lot of where the efficiencies and the savings are, and we want to share that.
Bethlen Falvey refused to say how much in cost savings he expects cities to find through the audits. According to the City of Toronto, the province is cutting its funding by nearly $180 million this year. It will be far cheaper to replace the troubled federal payroll system than to fix it. That's the conclusion of the Parliamentary Budget Office in a report out today. It says repairing the Phoenix pay system would cost $2.6 billion. Hannah Thibodeau has more.
The Parliamentary Budget Officer estimates to replace the beleaguered Phoenix payroll system will cost taxpayers $57 million. Now, that's to buy the new system, to implement it, and to train new employees on the software. However, that's just the initial costs. Once those initial costs are paid and it's implemented, it will cost at least $105 million per year to run that system. Now, they can't just simply replace one system with another because they have to fix the Phoenix system before they can actually transfer all the data. That's because you can't transfer bad data from one system to another. The current Phoenix payroll system pays approximately 300,000 federal employees. It administers their pay, and there have been issues since it was first implemented in 2009. Some employees getting paid too much, some not enough, and some not being paid at all. The PBO estimates that to fix these problems before the information is transferred into a new system will cost $2.6 billion. And he says it shouldn't be done until all of that information is correct. And he estimates that a new system wouldn't be in place until 2023. Hannah Thibodeau, CBC News, Ottawa.
A major speech today for Conservative leader Andrew Scheer. He was laying out his party's policies ahead of October's election in front of an elite crowd here in Toronto.
Canada should be a country of yes. Yes to more responsible resource exploration. Yes to more pipeline construction. Yes to investments in technology. Yes to new infrastructure projects that shorten commute times and keep our economy moving.
Scheer wants greater investment in energy projects. That includes creating a dedicated energy corridor running coast to coast. He says it would speed construction because companies wouldn't get caught up in onerous red tape. Scheer is also promising to kill the infrastructure bank created by the Liberals. And as we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. Stay with us. We will be right back.
This market update is brought to you by SSQ Insurance, reminding you that stronger communities make every person stronger.
It's a happy ending for one Toronto couple after their dog Charlie was found after being stolen in the city's East End on Tuesday. As Kelly Ewan reports, it was a community effort to get Charlie back home.
Hey, yeah. Good boy.
It's a moment Carol Boulay could hardly describe in words.
Oh, it was so thrilling.
A reunion with Charlie. He's 10 years old, a Siberian Husky mix, and for Carol and her husband Jim, a constant companion.
He's just a good dog, and he keeps my husband and I going.
On Tuesday evening, he was taken outside this value village on Danforth. Jim said he was taking Charlie out for one of his regular walks when he decided to slip into the store for a little bit, leaving Charlie tied up at the side of the building.
People have told us don't never do this, but you know, I've been getting away with it for 50 years. I blamed myself right off the bat.
City bylaws actually forbid leashing your dog to a pole unattended. Police say 2 men and a woman snatched Charlie in the short time he was left alone. Almost immediately, word spread all over social media.
I didn't believe that the social media could work like it does, but I never seen so many things happen all of a sudden. Like if it was 30 years ago, we didn't have all this stuff. It would have been they stole my dog, and I looked sad, and I would walk around, but I wouldn't have this mob of army of people.
People like Sophia Cottrell.
Actually, I came down on a mission.
Cottrell, a stranger, went searching for Charlie on Woodbine Beach.
I actually found him sitting right here. I said, Charlie, and he put his head up. I was so happy.
She said 2 men sitting nearby, one of them matching a suspect description, quickly left.
We are looking for the suspect, and our investigators will follow up.
Carol and Jim are just happy Charlie is safe.
I'm just grateful to have him home again.
And for Jim, a lesson learned.
There'll always be a leash on that dog, and it'll always be with me.
Kelda Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
Ellie Grin's days start like most children. She wakes up, gets dressed, and has breakfast. But what comes next is very different. The 11-year-old has been living on a boat since she was 5. She and her parents are from Ernsdale, Ontario, and they are sailing around the world. Take a look.
Hello, my name is Ellie Grin, and I am sailing around the world with my parents and sometimes my brother. Bringing in the Genoa.
You see right there, Ellie? Oh, Ellie.
So my dad is a crazy sailor with big hair, and my mom is my mom. She is half First Nation, and those are my parents. When I was 5 years old, I was coming down from my room in the morning, and my dad said, "Guess what?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "Well, we bought a sailboat, and I'm gonna sail you around the world."
You guys like this boat?
Yes.
Should we buy it?
Yes, good. Today I woke up and I brushed my teeth and ate breakfast. And then I got ready and we went into town and went grocery shopping, and I came back and helped fix stuff with my dad all day. I am my dad's working helper, I guess you could say. I help him with things to fix on the boat. This is our wind generator, and it takes energy from the wind, like a windmill, but it's tinier. Here are our solar panels, and we take energy from the sun with these and use it to power the boat. This is the water maker, and we are changing a filter in it. First, the water goes through a sea strainer, then a filter, then a pump, and then a membrane. When we're on long passages, we don't stop at night. We go all through the night because there's nowhere to stop. So we take turns, to give other people a break. My shifts are from 8 a.m. to 12 and from 4 o'clock in the evening till 8 o'clock at night. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Woohoo, we're on the equator. I've had shifts and when it's at night, it's dark out, and there's thunder crashing all around me and current and stuff, so that's harder. And there's some days where there's no wind and you're just using your motor and going slow. So those are pretty easy, so it depends. I also scuba dive, and I've seen lots of things scuba diving: cuttlefish, clownfish, jellyfish, all sorts of stuff. We're having a visit with some whales. Look how beautiful they are. They look like dolphins, but they're whales because they don't have a snout. I have books, and I also kind of just make my own school. My mom helps me with it sometimes.
Oh, what a life. Now, this next story may not sound appetizing, but you can't judge a book by its cover, or in this case, a taco by its protein. We'll take you to a Mexican restaurant in the beach that's specialty is grasshopper tacos. Take a look.
The people really, when they saw it, they say, "What is this?" It's a grasshopper. My name is Mali Fernandez. The name of the restaurant is Xola Restaurant. We are located at the beach. Xola Restaurant is authentic Mexican cuisine. All our ingredients we have comes from local sources like the meat and the vegetables, and some imports like dried peppers and the grasshoppers. Chapulines is a source, and it's very popular in Mexico. It's like a snack. Sometimes You know, the people is making tacos in Oaxaca or tortillas, and they have chapulines and some salsa. You add it and you eat it. I love the flavor and I love the texture. It's crunchy and it's full of flavor. It's a good source of protein and it's green.
I'm still getting over the grasshoppers. You're looking live at the Dufferin Grove Market. Farmers and vendors getting ready for the summer season. Coming up after the break, we'll head back out to Colette Kennedy, who's been hanging out there all day. Stay with us. We'll be right back. The 401 was extra congested this week in 1991 thanks to a truck driver protest. Hundreds clogged the major artery in response to high fuel taxes and regulations they say made it impossible to compete with low-cost Americans.
We're working our hearts out trying to make a living, and we can't go anywhere if everybody's taking it away from us.
Some commuters were furious.
Put them all in jail. All the truckers that are blocking the highways should be locked up.
While others shrugged it off.
I would say it's almost a typical morning on this highway. Worse than usual, but not much.
Many truckers stayed parked on the highway overnight. That forced the OPP to step in to bring it to an end. But the protest was successful when it came to public opinion.
They tax us to death for this and for that, yet nobody does anything, and I give them credit for finally standing up and doing something about it.
It's great. I think it's about time somebody stood up and said, enough is enough.
All right, let's head back to Colette Kennedy at Dufferin Grove Park. And Colette, I need some Swiss chard and some kale for those smoothies my wife makes me eat in the morning. Or drink.
Oh, I'm sure they're good for you. And don't worry, I'll get your grocery list here afterwards and pick everything up that you need. You know, we are looking, I know, at a spring that's been cool, it's been wet, so gardening, maybe this weekend, that's not what everyone's getting up to. So I'm going to ask some folks what they are going to be getting up to. And we've landed at the oyster tent because at the end of the market, and it's winding up, this is where everyone lands. Jason, what are your plans for the long weekend?
Well, I'm going to be shucking oysters, surprise. So we're shucking oysters at Henderson Brewery on Saturday, and then we'll be doing some catering throughout the weekend. So
it's a working long weekend.
It's working. We're off on Monday. I'll probably just sit back and drink some cold beer.
How about you guys? Can I ask what you're up to for the long weekend?
I will be working. Yeah, just working and enjoying the sun maybe.
I'll be working too in the city.
Okay. Is anybody not working?
I'm going to see the Raptors beat Milwaukee this Sunday.
My man, you have no idea. You are talking my language. I hope to be doing the exact same thing myself. Pretty sure that's what Dwight has in mind as well. What are you guys up to for the long weekend?
I'm going up to visit family up north a little bit.
Visiting family? Family, friends. Has the weather got anybody down? Are you all okay with the spring we've had?
Sunday's supposed to be nice, I think, like 18 degrees. Yeah.
Oh, you going to do the forecast?
Taking your jobs.
Sunday might be a little bit warmer than that, but that's okay. That's all right. We're all having a good time here, Dwight. And did you hear what that fellow said? We're going to watch the Raptors win? Hmm?
Yes, we are. Thanks, Colette.
Yeah, thank you.
Colette's having way too much fun out there. That's it for our show tonight. Thank you for watching. I'll have your next local newscast tomorrow night at 6. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you back here tomorrow.